that values time and puts God first. Appreciate everybody joining in as always. A lot of stuff to talk about today. Will is joining us as always on Tuesdays. I can talk. Looking forward a lot to next week. Tony and I get into a lot more draft stuff, so that'll be fun. So a lot going on here, a lot of fun. Let's get started. So Chris Finch, the Timberwolves head coach, last night basically came out and said, look, man, the Thunder foul a lot. You can't touch SGA. The way that you have to play the Thunder is just basically, he called it unfair. They're allowed to be extra physical, extra aggressive, and they don't call fouls. And when it comes to guarding SGA, it feels like you pretty much have to be hands off or they call fouls for him. Now, there's arguments for this and against this, which is what I don't really want to get into right now. Thunder fans will sit there and tell you, hey, they shoot the second lowest free throws per team, but they get fouled top 5 most. And then SGA, who is the people that are against this, SGA is the second most. So there's arguments you can make on both sides statistically, right? What I actually think is a bigger issue is the part that Chris Finch did discuss, which is it's not so much that if your favorite player didn't get a lot of free throws, you would complain. Like, Zion doesn't get a lot of free throws considering the physicality amount he drives. Jokic doesn't shoot a lot of free throws, him being a big man. Steph's never really had a bunch of free throws throughout his career, and I understand some of that is the fact that he's more of a three-point shooter. Fine. But it is truly frustrating when you have someone like Lou Dort on that team, the Williams, and they are just beyond extra aggressive. Everybody knows my allegiance. I'm a Pelicans fan, and when they played last year in the first round, it was really frustrating to hear commentators who, I know there's certain rules of things they're allowed to say, things they're not allowed to say. They can't be, it can't come off as bias or overtly shaming the refs. But it was frustrating to hear, hey, the Thunder are just playing this great defense on Brandon Ingram. Look at how they're containing him. Look at the torture chamber. And I'm like, and yet SGA, you just you hip check him a little bit or you just get in front of him, 2 free throws. That's where fans actually get frustrated. When the disparity is so huge, and this gets into fans' minds, this has to get into players' minds, it's just human nature. If I'm guarding you, and I'm only allowed to play a certain level of physicality, I'm only allowed to play a certain level of aggressive, because the refs will literally put the game in their hands and say, hey, you can do this or you can't, that's a problem. Again, SJ is a great player. He's probably going to win MVP. They're obviously a very young team, but it just feels, that's the other thing too, I think, with them being so young, is it almost feels like they skipped a step. You're supposed to go through, we understand when stars get calls. No one's really going to be that shocked if, they've missed calls on LeBron, but LeBron's also gotten a bunch of calls. They miss calls on Giannis, but Giannis gets a bunch of calls. Jokic, same vein. Like, we understand when superstars get these kind of calls. But it almost feels like, because SGA, we've all just deemed, okay, well, he's a superstar, even though he hasn't accomplished as much as some of the other superstars. This whole team gets a pass for how physical they're allowed to play. What can they get away with? And that almost feels unearned, because most of the time, young teams, it's all throughout NBA history, young teams normally get screwed on foul calls because they don't have the benefit of the whistle. They don't have the benefit of this experience, we just trust what they're doing because they're a veteran team. They've been here before. This almost feels like OKC has just outright missed a step. Like, where is their bad whistle in the playoffs? Where is their, even last year against the Mavericks, Luka just kind of came in and he was killing them just off the strength of shooting, jump shots, making shots, shot creation. It wasn't this, heavily disputed whistle. Again, James Harden, and we'll get to see how this plays out with them now confirmed, like, they are the number 1 seed. They are the best team in the West. We will see how this whistle plays out in the playoffs. But if SGA gets this same kind of whistle, how do you tell someone like James Harden, who this play style truly originates from him, And he could tell you, and we've all seen, he's been screwed in the playoffs because of lack of a whistle or change of a whistle, or that dynamic between the refs and the players letting them play the game changes in the postseason. Again, it just feels unearned. It's not that we're upset SGA gets to the line. Yeah, some people are going to be upset that he gets to the line. But the reality is, what's more upsetting is it feels like you have Lou Dort and the Williams, and they're tackling people, and that doesn't get called. They're praised and credited for being great defenders and such a physical team and such a tough team. But it just feels unearned because you can't do, Antonio Daniels always talks about this, match their intensity. He always talks about this during games. Match the other team's intensity, force the refs to do something. And what it really feels like is you're forcing the refs to do something, but they're only doing something for one side. Again, we just came off an NFL season where one of the biggest talking points for a two-time Super Bowl champion, a team that was the current dynasty of its league, and we were having ref discussions at the Super Bowl? For all the good things the NBA has going for it, and they do have some good things going for it from a talent perspective, from media perspective, just signed this huge $70 billion plus contract. You don't want that. And you don't want this, by the way, if you're the NBA, you don't want this on what is clearly one of your best teams and best position teams, because the Thunder aren't just great now. The Thunder are going to be great for years to come. The Thunder actually already have to start looking at, oh shit, how are we going to do this? Because our roster is going to get real expensive real fast. We have too many great players. They're young, and Chet Holmgren is going to be huge, not just because of his talent and his play, but just because of his contract. So SGA you're already paying. The Williams you're going to have to pay. Lou Dort you're going to have to give some kind of money for keeping him. And then you've got Caruso. And then Chet Holmgren will be interferes. So they already know coming down the line, this is going to be a very, very expensive team. And you don't want a team like that is going to be primed to be one of the best teams in your league. That's going to be primed to be one of the best teams in the Western Conference, one of the most exciting teams. We should be celebrating what this team is doing. And yet you have other coaches. And Chris Finch knows he's going to get fined. And some of this is a little bit of psychological warfare of, this happened with Harden. This has happened with other guys who we feel play this style. Luka gets sometimes where coaches will say, or general managers will say, or someone from the team will come out and say, hey, you know what? They just get a bullshit call. They just get bullshit whistles. And some of that is to get in the ref's mind. You could argue this happened a little bit in the NFL again. The Chiefs were talked all week leading up to the Super Bowl was, what about the refs? What about the refs? Ref question, ref question, ref question. And that turned into potentially refs swallowing some whistles that they might not have in the regular season or the playoffs. So some of this is psychological warfare. Some of this I also just truly believe it'd be one thing if it was just SGA getting to the line, but it feels like the style in which they play, it is impossible to flip that on them, which already makes the game feel like you're down 10, down 15 because of that disparity of how they're allowed to play defense versus how you're allowed to play defense. Moving on from that, everybody loves talking about nostalgia. Nostalgia is a real thing. I'm a very big victim of it. I love a bunch of things that I knew I loved when I was a kid or when I was younger, and I still love them, and it's really cool to go sit there and rewatch and re-enjoy some of these things. I'm a huge nostalgia victim. I'll be straight up with that. Let's get that out the way. Channing Frye on his podcast came out and said, you know what? Nostalgia is killing the NBA because these guys are not even getting compared to their eras. They are getting compared to guys who played 30, 40 years ago. And he went down the list and did the normal examples that we all know, LeBron to Mike, Steph and KD in their top 10, top 15 player rankings. But he said nostalgia is what's really killing the league. And I think nostalgia has just officially become a buzzword for the NBA specifically. Look, I'm not going to act like I'm not influenced by the brand of basketball that I watched growing up. That was Kobe, young LeBron, Spurs, Dirk, there's the Phoenix Suns, 7 second or less. I'm not going to act like that doesn't impact the way that I watch the game of basketball. It doesn't impact the way that I enjoy the game of basketball. But nostalgia has a line. It's not this all-encompassing, I can blame everything because nostalgia, nor is it this all-encompassing, I can love all of this because nostalgia. I'll use an example. when the first iteration of the Warriors, when they got great, young Steph, Clay, Draymond, when they first got to this level of they were contending for championships, winning titles, going back-to-back with LeBron, they were an evolution of a style of basketball that we had seen. They were essentially what the San Antonio Spurs and Greg Popovich had been doing for years, decades at that point, a decade plus. They took that, added some tweaks, made a few adjustments, and had the two greatest shooters ever. But I didn't need nostalgia to appreciate what the Warriors did. I could just see the same way we all fell in love with Kobe Bryant's game, which was a add-on for Michael Jordan's game, just a couple tweaks, a couple edits, a couple doing a few things differently. We got to appreciate, if you were a real fan of basketball, what that looked like with the Warriors. So because I knew of how the Spurs played basketball, and I got to see it evolve and grow into this really dynamic offense with the Warriors, I didn't need nostalgia for that. I had appreciation because I knew my history. In that same regard, I have less appreciation when I see some of these teams and all of their offense is free throw line up. It's a, let me set a half-ass screen, pick, pop, boom, catch, shoot, and that's their offense. And that happens a lot. That's not nostalgia. That's not old people or boomers ruining what you love. That is simply just not an appealing brand of basketball. I heard Bomani Jones say this. We probably don't give enough credit to the styles of play that currently exist in the NBA. I'd give you that. That's valid. But what he said is, we also, though, don't have as many styles of players. You don't have, like, who is a true slasher in today's NBA? I would have told you coming into the league, Anthony Edwards was a perfect example of a slash player. And even he, now he's on the ball more, he's taking some more of the point guard duties, but he shoots way more threes now. And I'm not saying shooting threes is bad, and I'm not going to sit there and tell you that guys missing twos is more entertaining than guys missing threes. I just want to see some offense, some motion, not just some possessions are literally dribble the ball up court, and this happens consecutively. This isn't just like one or two. This is like consecutive 3, 4, 5 possessions in a row. Some guys dribble the ball up court, pass it to someone at the three-point line, boom, they take a shot. And that's offense. And while that's always slower parts of offense have always existed in like the first quarter of games, fill out, see what they're trying to do. I'll go to the era of basketball I grew up on. The Nuggets were a fast-paced team, but you missed 2 or 3 shots in a row, they would slow it down, half-court offense, get the ball to Carmelo Anthony, let him go to work. The Mavericks, they could play with pace. You miss a few shots in a row, you get the ball to Dirk Nowitzki, high post area, let him go to work. That's not nostalgia killing the sport. That's not nostalgia ruining the experience. There's a line. Yes, are there some people who just nostalgia bomb and nostalgia watch stuff and complain about everything that comes new? Of course. You know what you do with those people? You ignore them. You just ignore them. You all have that one aunt, that one uncle in the family who just talks about back in my day, this is better, that was better. Cool, you're right, bro. It was better back in your day. But for the average fan, the average experience, nostalgia's not making or breaking this. Stop using it as some kind of excuse. Stop using it as some kind of all-encompassing word. Some things are better. Some things are worse. There's going to need to be some tweaking that goes on with the rules because the reality is the game has probably been so solved that, yeah, guys only need to do a couple of things to be productive players. Guys only need to do a couple of things to be good NBA players. You know, if you can play defense, you can sit in the corner, shoot a three-point shot when it's passed to you, that's probably all you're working on. That's probably all you're doing. Again, it's not nostalgia. That's not old people ruining the game you love. Think. That's all I got to do, guys. Just think a little.